When Pontiac nicknamed their own muscle-bound creation as the Judge, they were calling their shot. With a name like that, as long as the car had the muscle to back it up, it was sure to be an instant classic. And oh boy, did the GTO Judge deliver. And that's a good thing because, as you'll soon find out, it had to. The GTO itself essentially created the muscle car scene back in 1964, but what was once a non-existent market had become one rife with competition. The horsepower arms race was on. Every manufacturer now had their own extensive lineup of muscle cars and pony cars to cater to the insatiable appetite of us speed freaks. With more options on the table, the GTO was met with more sales resistance towards the late 1960s. Pontiac was feeling the pressure, and they knew to keep GTO sales competitive, they had to get creative with their models and branding in a way that would stick with younger consumers. This new GTO model had to be something special. Models like the Plymouth Roadrunner were already trying to leverage this fun branding concept to help stand out in a crowded market. But instead of going the cartoon character route, Pontiac would look to another pop culture avenue to base their naming on. Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In TV program had a skit where they would utter the line for two of the brightest minds at Pontiac, John DeLorean and Jim Wangers. Naming this new GTO option package the Judge helped appeal to younger buyers more, and it would give us some of the greatest marketing literature of all time. Period adverts, which came out at the tail end of 1968, ran headlines like "The Judge can be bought," "All rise for the Judge," and others. The ads for the Judge were as clever as they were effective at drumming up sales for the car's planned 1969 launch. But how was the car's real-world performance? Well, let's just say that the Judge would rule with a cast iron fist, one that was 400 cubic inches of displacement and was available in two distinct flavors. The standard engine option on the Judge GTO was the Pontiac Ram Air 3 version of their 400 cubic inch V8. Now, Pontiac's Ram Air system in and of itself was an induction system where, in the case of the Judge, the carburetor and air cleaner had a plate with a foam surround on them that helped seal the functional hood scoops on the GTO's hood to the air cleaner to force colder ambient air directly into the engine as opposed to the hotter air that would be sitting around the engine bay. There was also a cable mechanism that actuated doors on this system to be able to pull in air from under the hood as well. This wasn't the first Ram Air car that Pontiac built, but they did represent one of the most potent versions yet. The Ram Air 3 utilized the same core iron block 400 HO as other high-performance Pontiacs did. This motor was itself a bored-out version of the Pontiac 389, with a 4.12-inch bore and a 3.75-inch stroke. The Judge cars came equipped with a 10 3/4 to 1 compression ratio, a performance-oriented hydraulic cam that was either in the flavor of the 744 cam or the 068 cam, depending on production dates, flat-top pistons, a dual-plane manifold, D-port heads with 2.11-inch intake valves and 1.77-inch exhaust valves, and of course a 4-barrel quadrajet carburetor. With the added push from the induction system, these engines peaked at 366 horsepower at 5,100 RPM and 445 foot-pounds of torque at 3,600 RPM. There was no denying that the standard Judge motor was as potent as anything else with the same cubes was. But there was another engine option available for the Judge for those that wanted the pinnacle, the Ram Air 4. While on paper the Ram Air 4 only made 4 horsepower more than the Ram Air 3 car, 370 in total, in the real world it was a completely different beast altogether, and it was more suitable for track use than daily driver duty. It was still a 400 cubic inch Pontiac V8, but now the Ram Air 4 used a 4-bolt main block instead of a 2-bolt for extra strength. It also had a beefier crank, a better intake manifold, better flowing heads, new lifters, new rocker arms, and a much hotter camshaft, which was referred to as the 041 cam. With all of those changes, it's pretty obvious to anyone with a brain that these cars made more than 4 horsepower over the standard ones. Actual power output was more near the 450 horsepower range, which put it up there with some of the baddest motors of the period from all makes. With your Judge, you could row your own gears through a standard 3-speed floor-shifted manual or 2 Muncie 4-speeds. The M20, which was the wide ratio 4-speed box, was available on cars with lower rear gears, while the M21, which was the close ratio 4-speed box, was outfitted to cars with higher rear gears. The ratios available on the Judge would be a 323, a 355, a 390, and a 433 for that rear gear. There was also an automatic 3-speed transmission available on the Judge, but we all know which version we would rather have. The Ram Air 3 cars could do low to mid 14-second quarter-mile times regularly, and the Ram Air 4 Judges, well, they could hit into the 13s if driven right. Not bad for a car that was over 3,500 pounds. Stopping power, though, that was a different story because all the Judges came standard with 4-wheel drums, and you'd have to option for front disc brakes if you wanted better braking performance. Suspension-wise, the Judge was basically your standard performance GM A-body affair, with an upgraded set of springs, shocks, and control arms. A 10-bolt live axle rear was prominently fitted out back. The interior of the Judge cars were also nothing special compared to your regular GTOs, but the exterior, well, that was where you were able to let everyone know what you had with your Judge, starting with the Judge decals on the front fenders as well as the colored side stripes. You could also get your hood-mounted 8,000 RPM tack on the driver's side to give the front end a little bit of extra pizzazz to match the rear 60-inch wide spoiler that was fitted to the deck lid. 14 by 6-inch rally wheels were the standard wheel options on the car. There were a few different color options available for the 1969 Judge GTOs, but none are as iconic as Carousel Red, which, to be honest, looks like an orange to everyone else. But no one cared about the trivial technicalities like shades of red versus orange, because the hideaway headlight, paint-matched bumper 69 GTO with the Judge branding was absolutely one of the coolest cars released that year. Starting at an MSRP of $3,500 for the base Ram Air 3 cars, the Judge was a hit. Initially designed as a 1-year-only trim package, just under 7,000 Judges were sold in 1969. Pontiac's bigwigs decided to extend the production of this new GTO based on its initial sales data for another year, and as such, the Judge lived on for 1970 with a newly designed front and rear fascia. Gone were the hideaway headlights, and in their place were 4 separate headlight pods with a newly designed grille. The rear end also got changed around with different taillights and a new spoiler, and a new, more vibrant selection of colors were introduced in 1970 to keep up with the times. The Ram Air 3 and Ram Air 4 engines were still available into the 1970 model year without a ton of changes. But there was a problem. The second year of the Judge's life didn't bring with it great sales numbers. In fact, they were on track to sell just under 4,000 cars that year. GTO sales as a whole were slumping hard, and no matter how good the marketing was behind the Judge, the muscle car market was starting to shift due to reasons outside of Pontiac's control, between insurance premiums, EPA regulations, and more. To put it in perspective, in 1969, they sold over 70,000 GTOs. In 1970, try 40,000. With the trend looking like it was going to get worse, Pontiac in February of 1971 pulled the plug on the Judge, which was already on life support. But since they canceled it in February of 71, there were still people who ordered the Judge for that next model year. So Pontiac needed to build them, albeit just about 370 of them. The 1971 cars featured another revised front fascia, a new hood, new optional honeycomb wheels, and a new motor. For 1971, there was only one engine available in the Judge, a high-output 455 cubic inch Pontiac V8. This motor added 55 cubes to the Judge, which, if it retained all the performance prowess of earlier motors, would have created quite the power bump. Sadly, because of those EPA regulations that I mentioned, this new 455 mil was designed to be able to run on unleaded gas, as 1973 would be the first set of emission reduction standards instituted by the agency. As a result, the compression ratio was knocked down to just 8.4 to 1 on the 455. Peak power came in at 335 horsepower. while torque was still an earth-moving 480 foot-pounds. Even with that motor not having the full beans to say, for 1971, this was still a very serious performance car that arguably had more low-end shove now than the other Ram Air 3 cars, thanks to the extra displacement. Nonetheless, it was the nail in the coffin. By the time the Judge's reign was over, just about 10,000 cars were built. The Judge couldn't save the GTO from its sales slump by itself, but those 10,000 cars gave us one of the most iconic vehicles of an era, and dare I say, some of the best automotive advertising the world has ever seen, which is probably why today the remaining Judge cars are so valuable. Thank you all for watching another Rare Cars documentary video. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel.